I do not own Star Trek, or any of the related characters. Star Trek is a mark owned by Paramount. This story is a work of fanfiction and is for entertainment only. I am not making profit from this story. This is a tribute. All rights of Star Trek belong to Paramount. This fanfiction takes place between the second and third movies of the Kelvinverse.
Star Trek Reloaded, Chapter 9 bis, 13. Stealing dilithium.
The Sulibans must get into it, or someone else who hasn't yet realized that the temporal Cold War is over. If a temporal war can end.
A sudden sparkle near the warp core immediately roused him from his thoughts. At the end of the teleportation, instinct led Notby to jump to the ground. Reed's first shot passed inches above his head. The second one was a perfect hit. It was already late. The Englishman saw large tanks disappear, connected to pipes which immediately collapsed, preventing further damage and radioactive leaks. The officer felt a brief, strong jolt under his feet. The ship was out of warp. The alarm was deafening and the red emergency lights had already replaced the standard lighting. He cursed under his breath, clenching his fists until it almost hurt. He hesitated to turn towards the intruder. From where he heard the voices of his personal surveillance staff, he was certain of what he would see or, rather, not see. Obviously he had disappeared with the tanks. Obviously.
Lieutenant Commander, what should we do with this?
Reed whirled around. The man, because that was it, was lying sprawled on the ground, unconscious. A guard, in nondescript blue gear, knelt over the intruder, monitoring him. Reed hinted at a half-smile.
Sleeping Beauty will be fine when she wakes up. Immediately to the infirmary, watched closely, running.
Reed?
The Admiral was on the communicator.
What the hell happened? We are without energy, only emergency reserves.
The security chief felt paralyzed. He had failed. He had put the ship in danger.
Admiral, someone teleported on board and must have illuminated the dilithium tank. They stole it. I couldn't stop it, it's my fault.
For a few seconds only static came out of the communicator.
Lieutenant, anyone who manages to teleport things and living beings from one warp-traveling ship to another, and at these distances could have crushed us in a second. I'm sure you did everything possible.
Reed was grateful for these words, but he was certain that had failed anyway.
Admiral, we have a prisoner in the infirmary.
Next time, before making useless excuses, tell me things like this, Reed, thanks.
Oh, sorry.
Archer hung up, leaving the officer to reprioritize. Seconds of uncertainty passed on the deck of the Kobayashi Maru.
Scott, what?
From the intercom of his command post, hesitantly, the chief engineer's words reached Kirk.
Captain, we have dilithium, but Notby's vital signs faded before we could lock onto him.
He was probably just stunned. It's a compatible picture.
The older Spock nodded at the young incarnation's statement. Seconds of silence followed as the ship continued to warp 7 away from NX-01A, headed towards Romulan space. Kirk seemed to stare into space, then.
Chekhov, turn towards the last position of Archer's ship. Maximum curvature.
Captain, recovering Notby would be risky.
Spock, you know well that you won't change my mind. All the usual tirade about what is logical to do, or not. You can even save yourself that.
The elderly Vulcan was aware that Kirk was responding angrily to his first officer, even though the remark originated with him. The young Spock was silent, embarrassed and dejected, under Uhura's gaze of ill-concealed mockery. Kirk continued to give repeated orders.
Scott, load that dilithium. Chekhov, once you reach the ship, keep a useful distance for the sensors and continue to obscure our details. Spock. You both Spock, action plan suggestions please.
Captain, I.
Dr. McCoy, please intervene if you think you have something sensible and relevant to say to the situation, or...
McCoy here from the infirmary. Closing.
The problem, Captain, is that the ship, now that she is no longer at warp, will probably have her shields up. Even Scott's magical teleportation doesn't seem to be able to overcome them.
Fair consideration, Lieutenant Uhura.
Kirk didn't hide a certain nervousness.
And it's a problem that needs to be solved immediately.
Captain, if I may.
Kirk turned his head towards Chekhov.
Obviously. Do you have any ideas?
The young Russian seemed to hesitate and allowed himself a cough before replying.
The NX-01A was the first Federal ship to have real energy shields, replacing the previous hull polarization technique.
Go ahead, tell me something I don't know.
They were rather primitive shields. Basically the result of reverse engineering on the little that the Earthlings had managed to recover of Vulcan technology.
You can say, Steele, it's not that we're offended.
Old Spock almost regretted the clarification, but he couldn't contain himself.
We knew well about your constant hunger for information, and your shortcuts to get it. Within certain limits we have always allowed it, and it made us understand better who we were dealing with.
The Russian looked embarrassed, while Kirk bit his tongue to avoid replying.
Chekhov, please.
He was saying, Captain, that those shields required a lot of power and were very inefficient. The NX-01A is practically adrift right now. They've channeled much of their remaining energy into the shields. A direct phaser fit between the engine nacelle should be quite capable of bringing them all the way down for several seconds.
For a phaser shot, we would have to get very close, being completely visible to the ship's sensors. It doesn't seem like a great idea to me.
Scott's voice from the intercom was confused among the thousand noises in the engine room.
Assuming that even a single shot isn't enough to blow that grinder up.
Silence fell on the bridge, immediately interrupted by Sulu.
Sir, in 2 minutes we will be within reach of Mr. Scott's teleporter. In 10 we will be detectable by their ship.
From what I know, Archer has never met the Ent, the Kobayashi Maru.
It is likely that many things are still top secret,
said the first officer, in response to Kirk's observation.
Just as it is possible that our action has already changed the past far beyond our desires.
Kirk intertwined his fingers' hands and closed the eyes for a few seconds.